I wouldn't like it to appear as if principals are making suggestions and the suggestions are being implemented. We are making our proposals, and at the same time, we expect other stakeholders to contribute into these proposals. Number one, we are saying that the fees cap, actually, when it was introduced through a discussion and a process that was chaired by Kilemi Mwiria. This process was very inclusive. The principals were involved, the parents were involved, array of stakeholders were involved, and fees was capped at some figure. Later, this figure was increased to 22,244. It is now 8 years from the time this was increased. Definitely, we are aware inflation has taken place, the cost of living is high, and schools are in the same economic environment. And therefore, we purchase from the same market, we pay the same, at the same rates, electricity, we have to pay salaries, we have to ensure that school workers have their annual salary increment, and the rest. And definitely, because this period has taken long, it is time that we have a review. And that is what we are saying. We need to review. And where a review is to take place, definitely as the people who are making proposals, we've given a proposal. But other stakeholders will come in, and they look at our proposal, they look at other factors, the inflation rate and the rest, and we come up with an agreement. But to us, there is need for a review and a review to the upper side.
Why? That's a question.
I've just said we are aware that the inflation rate has changed. The cost is higher. We are paying more for every service. We are paying more for goods supplied. We are not paying any less than any Kenyan. We are buying everything from the same market. And in 8 years' time, Mr. Mbija, the kilo of sugar that you bought 8 years ago, the cost, if we may look at it, is not the same as now. And that's what we are saying.
Okay. All right, Janet, what do you make of that proposal? Because he's justifying it. He says cost of living has gone up, schools can barely survive.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Trevor, for letting us have this conversation this morning. And by the special grace of God, I was a member of the Kilemi Mwiria task force that sat way back in 2014. And I really identify with what the principals sitting in Mombasa are talking about today. And I really sometimes pity them, because it is not very strategic for them, especially right now when parents are complaining. In fact, everyone in the country is complaining about very high costs of living. And this figure was agreed in 2014. So 8 years down the line, principals are made to still work with a figure that is really not workable. And this, you know, I've been a champion of affordable secondary education, but I think also we have to remain realistic and really challenge government that it is really painful to see principals who are also parents. They live in communities. So that even to see Mr. Indimuli being this candid and saying that really we need a fee increment, he knows that it is not a very politically correct statement for him to say. But he has to run an institution. How does that institution run? I think it is a failure of government, because when we sat in 2014, we said, and we really capped school fees, because those that can remember, at that particular time, schools were charging all the way to 102,000 per year, 98,000, 80,000. It was really crazy. But there was this task force that was set up, and it was all inclusive. Civil society, the heads of schools, the parents, we all sat down. Yeah. And we went point by point and said, let us understand your fee structures. Because you're in this particular school and your fees is 100,000. Someone else is in another place and their fees is 48,000. What is causing this variance? That is how we came up with a figure of 53,000 for the national and the big schools, because really the expenditures were a little bit, various from other schools that you would consider smaller.
Yeah.
But 8 years later, I know I was trying to get the report right here, and there was a clause that gave the Ministry of Education a responsibility to review. At once every 3 years, the ministry would sit down and check. Are we still? Is this still realistic? Can we still manage with this?
Yeah.
So 8 years down the line, and no such review has happened. No conversation about the cost of living has been encouraged. I really think that sometimes government is causing the heads of schools to carry burdens that otherwise do not belong to them. And then also, when the principals are sitting in Mombasa discussing this, I would really not want anybody to think of fetching money on the way of parents. It is the responsibility of government to take care of free secondary education in this country. And that is what we have agreed in the Constitution. So that what parents have been doing, they have just been coming in to support. But it cannot be that we sit down and we apportion the burden 100% on the parents. That is not going to be acceptable.
All right. Mr. Mayo, let me bring in Nicholas Mayo. He is the chairperson, Kenya National Parents Association. Mr. Mayo, can parents bear the burden of increased school fees at this moment?
Trevor, for having me, and also thank you for recommendation from the teachers in Mombasa. What I would say is no parent would agree any increase of fees, even 1 shilling. The reason is we are in abnormal times, and the conditions parents are going through now is hell. And I would say, when the proposal was, when the principals had a proposal and it was circulated in the social media, you could see for yourself that no parent accepted that. And because I speak on behalf of them, I would agree with Nimuli and Madam to say that we need a government to increase capitation. As parents, we are in agreement with that. But school fees, as stipulated in the Constitution, it says that the Constitution, education in Kenya is free and compulsory. And if principal will say they want to increase fees on us parents, that means they will force parents to withdraw their children in boarding schools and to take them to day schools. Because day schools, parents are not paying any money. So I don't think any parent will accept that.
Okay.
But we will support the principles on increase of competition.
Okay.
Yes.
Ichesa?
Thank you very much, Trevor. First and foremost, any discussion on the cost of education must be towards lowering the cost of education. There is no justification in law for the increase in the cost of basic education. In any event, we have an obligation under our Constitution and international covenants to make basic education free for all in this country. Be it as it may, I have also realized that government is not funding free secondary education. What is happening? We have theories on paper that there is funding, and I'll demonstrate briefly. Government purports to give schools 22,000 to fund their tuition activities. Out of these 22,000, 5,000 is conditional, that this 5,000 must go to infrastructure. 3,200 shillings is retained at the ministry for the purchase of textbooks. 2,000 shillings is retained at the ministry for the so-called Edu Afya, NHIF for children. 1,500 is retained by the ministry for activities, the music festivals, drama festivals. 500 shillings have to go to the sub-counties to fund the ministry activities. 200 shillings goes to Semase. So the principal remains with 9,000 shillings on paper. In a term, a principal has 3,000 shillings to pay workers, to pay teachers on BOM, to purchase essential commodities like chemicals for laboratories. This is not sustainable. So if the government were to release the 22,000 as it is to fund basic education and not take a hand to take the money back, this money would be enough. But government takes money to schools and takes back the same money. Why are they buying textbooks, some that are unnecessary? A school is not giving computer studies, but you'll get 100 textbooks for computer in a school where only 7 candidates are taking computer. But because the ministry has taken over through cartels in the supply of textbooks, that is the only thing they do with rare commitment. We don't have activities going on. For the corona period, we've not had drama festivals, we've not had music festivals. Government has not come out to tell us that the money that was meant for drama festivals and music festivals, which runs into hundreds of millions, was used for this and that. Government used to fund infrastructure. Today, they're not funding infrastructure. Instead, they're telling principals, pick 5,000 from the free secondary education fund and do infrastructure. So it is an art of conmanship between the ministry and the schools.
Yeah.
If the PS can just face the questions that the principals were candidly asking him yesterday and answered soberly, we'll not be discussing about an increment. We can survive within the 22,000 the government releases.
Yeah. In Imuli, is that the situation? And would it be better if the government released all the funds in a timely manner and all of it to the schools?
Thank you, Mr. Mbija. One thing, may I mention that we are still continuing with our conference. Still proposals are going to be made, and I wouldn't want to preempt. Secondly, I would like to say that I wouldn't like to agree that there is conmanship. I think language here is very important because saying a government is conning. I would not want to be party to that kind of statement in this forum. What I would say is we have presented our challenges. Yes, Chesa has mentioned what is retained and the government had its reason for retaining. We have also said it is time now this money is released. So I would not want to dive into the issues of saying this is retained, because I have, and I did it yesterday to the PS, and here's our document. Allow me, Mr. Mbija, not to discuss so much detail at this point because the conference is still going on and we are still presenting many more things to come. Yeah, but I agree, yes, some money is retained for textbooks, and there was a reason why government did that. Yes, there is money retained for EduAfia. Yes, there is money retained for activity, and we have demonstrated to the PS why we now feel time has come that part of this that is retained can now be released to institutions.
Yeah. The other bone of contention also is that the principals are demanding that it should be mandatory for students to buy reference materials such as Bibles, Quran, mathematical sets, atlas, dictionaries, and kamusis, as well as they're key to the learning of the students. How do you justify that? Is it a must that the parents come with that, or should the schools provide it?
Let us be very, very open on this. There are certain learning materials that are not just learning materials. They are a must-have for any person. A dictionary is a must-have reference material, even when you are not a student. You would need to refer to a dictionary for certain expression in English, or a kamusi for certain expressions in Kiswahili. The Bible, as a religious person, definitely, and the Quran, those are a requirement. As a Christian or as a Muslim, you would need it whether you are a student or you are not a student. And remember, majority of all our students are either Muslims or they are Christians. Our schools are also sponsored by some of these faith-based schools. It is only that they become now a reference material when now a child is taking Christian religious education as a subject. The Quran becomes a reference material when this child is taking Islamic religious studies as a subject. And therefore, because all these subjects are offered in our schools from Form 1, definitely that reference material would be required. Remember, even what is retained in schools, and I want parents to understand this, even what is retained in the ministry, it does not cater, or the ministry does not buy reference materials for students. And these are individualized books. The Bible is for the student. It does not come to the school and the school retains them. The dictionary, the mathematical table, the geometrical set. And from my experience, and this is what I also mentioned yesterday, and I would like Mr. Mayo is here, and we always discuss this. From our experience, if these things are not bought when the child is coming in Form 1, they will never be bought. You will have to, the child will reach Form 2, doesn't have a geometrical set, it becomes an issue. Yeah? What we should say is, how do the schools assist the students in safeguarding these materials that are bought while the child is in Form 1? Yes, at Form 1 immediately enters, the child may not have enough content that will keep making him or her refer to the dictionary or the kamusi. But content is built. So we need to check, how do we as schools ensure the safety of these dictionaries of the child so that they don't get lost, or the mathematical table until maybe second term when the child begins introduction to the use of the mathematical table.
Yeah.
So it is not that we are just saying let them have it for the sake that we want to, I don't know how to put it, but these are materials the parents will buy as they come to school. But I can assure you, no child is going to be sent away because he has not come with a mathematical table or he has not come with a dictionary.
Okay.
These are the materials, yes, we hear, the ones like a djembe, like a hockey stick. I agree when you say they are not really necessary. That one I agree totally.
Okay.
But the one that I did talk about yesterday, in my view, and in the view of all my colleagues, these are just standard books that a student or a grown-up needs in their own libraries.
All right. Janet, what are your thoughts on this? These mandatory items. Why can't the schools just have them then plenty? Things like dictionaries and kamusis should be in school so that any student can use it.
Yeah, I think what we need to understand is that where are we coming from? We are coming from the point of view of wanting to accommodate every child in school. You know, that's really the background. And I know that because even as we went to school, and we also came from backgrounds that were really compressed in terms of resources, and you could see, like I remember when I was going to school, there were things that were called access to, so that you didn't have to have your own, but when you needed, like in the library, you could access, if you want to do geography, you could go see the atlas and all that. Because I'm thinking, what my friend Indimuli is saying is really right, that as a teacher, you'd want a child to have their kamusi so that, you know, if should there be reference, then there is no worry. As a Kiswahili teacher would probably feel more comfortable that every child is having every tool that they require so that then they can be able to execute the instructions that they are given, you know, within the class. But what are we talking about? We are talking about a parent who wants to admit their child in Form 1. And by the time you go to buy a Bible, by the time you go to buy an atlas, by the time you go to buy a dictionary, by the time you go to buy a kamusi, you do not have 7,000. You know, that's a budget of 7,000 Kenya shillings. We are coming to an understanding that there are families that would not otherwise have that 7,000 Kenya shillings. Asked at once, they might not be having it. But maybe the family can have 700 at some point, they can have 1,000 at some point, so that by the time you are approaching the gate of where you're being admitted, and all these things are being asked of you. Trevor, I want to tell you that without 100,000 Kenya shillings today, you cannot admit a child in Form 1. That is discriminative and it is marginalizing. That the conversation we are having about school fees, the conversations we are having about the requirements that are being asked are premised on that particular conversation. That how do we open ourselves up to accommodate as many people as we can. And we hear it from the experts, the principals, when they are saying, we need all this, fair. But how about a family that does not have 200 shillings today, and they have a child that must be taken to school?
Yeah.
Those are the balances that we are saying. Let us try and strike the balances, and there are balances that can be struck. For example, instead of having every child come with this particular thing, we could probably have part of them in the library, so that if somebody wants to go visit the atlas and just do the transaction geography is talking about, they can at least be able to do that. But let us not make things look like, even at home, we never have everything that we need.
Yeah.
It can look normal that it is for every family to have a TV set, but there are families in this country that do not have a TV at this particular point in time. It does not mean that they will not grow up to be individuals that probably better than every of us that probably grew up with some of these things. So the only thing we are asking of the principals is, we hear you, but we are also saying that from where we are sitting right now, we want to open up education to everybody. Can we invite a child to school? Let's check. Do they have the basics that can allow them to do to stay in class? Do they have? If they do not have, they can share. A lot of these things can be shared. I remember when I was called to Naivasha Girls in my Form 1, coming from the village school that I had come to. It was funny, and this I want to tell the principals. It was looking funny that everybody has an atlas this size. So by the time you open your atlas and your friend is opening and the entire 45 of you are opening an atlas, it even looks wasteful, Yet, with 10 atlases, what you're talking about can still be done. Can we get to that level where we do not materialize, so much? I always give an example of these private, schools, where you go to visit your child, it's over midterm, you're having a conversation with your teacher, and there are all these 13 books that you should buy. I don't know what revised, Kiswahili revised, what. By the time you go home, you have 7 books that the child probably will even look at only 5 pages of that. We are being wasteful.
Okay. All right. Let's take a quick break. When you come back, we're talking about... Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Yes. I still want to mention that as principals, we are very cognizant of the fact of the differences in the families and in the children that come to our schools. The major thing is people have never taken time to really look at what goes on in each and every schools. And you'll discover that, yes, we may sit here and we are saying we need this. But if you went to individual schools, you'll find that measures have been put in place to ensure that those that cannot manage are assisted. I know even where I am at the moment, we have a program where we are able even to pay fees for some of the children, where my colleague teachers are raising 200 shillings per term towards a kitty that is now used at the end of the year. When we've raised a bit of money, we are able to pay fees for some very needy and even buy some of those things. What we are simply saying is, when you hear the principals say, this is what is needed, yes, that is what is needed. When we give a blanket cover, and we are Kenyans, and say, don't carry this, even those who can manage will not do it, because it is now a policy that this should not be carried to school, or this should not be bought. But if we all understood that if I can do it and provide it for my child, let me provide. Yeah? If the school has a few of them in the library, I'm not saying that these schools are empty, that they don't have these few dictionaries in the library. But remember, the school may have only 10 or so dictionaries in the library. The school has a population of about 1,500 students. Yeah. You can imagine if all of them have an assignment and they have to refer to these 10 dictionaries, definitely there would be a scramble for them. But this can be eased if those parents who can manage to buy for their children do so. Then the schools are able to take care of the few students who may not and truly cannot manage, because we have the mechanism of identifying such students.
All right.
So let us not look
I
at
want
it
to
that
weigh
it's just
in
a
briefly.
blanket cover that
Yes.
principals are saying this. No, we are human.
All right.
And we look at this from the human side also.
All right, let me bring
I want to weigh in briefly and agree with both Janet and Indumuli that these books are necessary, but they are not mandatory. In fact, this narrative of being mandatory is being pushed by entrepreneurs in the textbook industry who want to make the cost of education go very high. Why are these principals and everyone not insisting on soft copies of these documents? We can have soft copies of dictionaries, soft copies of Bibles. We only need to equip our ICT infrastructure and say we can then pay even 10 shillings for our children to access this material online. Why is it that in the 21st century we are still insisting on physical Bibles, physical atlas, physical mathematical table? We are asking people who have never seen a mathematical table to buy and making it mandatory when the fellows do not know how to use it. So this narrative of textbooks is actually going to push the cost of education higher. In the Form 1 admission that is coming in the next 2 or 3 weeks, the cost of these mandatory textbooks is higher, 2 times higher than fees. The cost of education in high school per year is 8,000 shillings. The cost of dictionaries and other items is about 24,000 shillings. Why should the cost of supplementary textbooks be 3 times higher than the cost of education? What goal are we seeking to achieve? We should not make these textbooks mandatory. Those who can afford, let them afford. But as a nation, we should move towards making these books into soft copies. They can be cheaper.
Mayo, what is your proposal as a Parents Association chairperson?
Yeah, I totally agree because we've been doing it. We've been buying dictionaries, camuses, geometrical sets, Bibles. But parents are complaining of the safety of those materials in schools. Because once you buy your child when he's returning from 1, at the end of the term, he has no Bible, he has no geometrical set, he has no Quran, he has no atlas. So the challenge with us parents is the safety of those materials in schools. But in buying them, we totally agree. We've been doing that.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, let me take a quick break. Now, when you come back in Mulika, I know your function is about to begin, so I'll allow you to first come in and just give your remarks on 2 issues when we come back from the break, and then allow you to get to the conference. But keep your views coming at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag DayBreak. We'll see you in just a bit.